Welcome, dear night crawlers, to Creepin' It Real with Sindee Nyte, where the shadows have opinions, the dead keep receipts, and bedtime stories come with a body count. I'm your host, Sindee Nyte, your mistress of the macabre, your guide through the strange, the sinister, and the beautifully unhinged. And with me is Creature, spinner of twisted tales, poet of the pitch black and the troubled little candle flame flickering in the drafty hallway of human imagination. Tonight, we open the crypt and let the words crawl out. Stories that breathe in the dark, poems that whisper through cracked walls, little love letters to the eerie, the mournful, and the deliciously damned. So dim the lights, lock the doors, check the corners of the room twice if you're smart, once if you're brave. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we resurrect them. And the night, my darlings, is just getting started. The night doesn't fall, it arrives like an uninvited guest with perfect manners and a knife behind its back. In the crooked little town of Black Hollow, where the street lamps flicker like they're trying to remember how electricity works, nighttime isn't just a lack of sunlight. It's a personality, a presence, a thing. And tonight, it's a mood.
Sindee sips ink from a crystal cup. Topics float up in a swirling puff. Tonight a pirate, tomorrow a priest. She toasts each topic like a charming beast. One co-host swears the moon's alive, the other claims they did not survive. Welcome to Creepin' It Real. Sindee Nyte, the Baroness. Curious questions answered, pulling all the threads of your strange routine. Step through the doorway where nothing's ever quite what it seems. Raise your glass to the unusual things. Welcome to Creepin' It Real.
The story this evening is The Terror of Night Woods by Creature.
This actually ties in very well because their hearse is the Dark Night, Night Woods.
There we go. See that?
There is a forest known as Night Woods. Legend tells of a horrifying creature that roams these woods and calls them home. Now let me tell you, this creature is far from an urban legend. Word says a girl new to the village was not aware of this beast and decided to go on a walk through Night Woods. As she began her journey in, the townspeople looked at her in shock, shame, and sadness, knowing she would not be coming back out. And so she started off on a trail, and it was very early in the day. She had a whole backpack prepared of stuff.
Statistically speaking, nothing good is ever started with, I'm just going to take a walk in the woods.
As soon as she entered, right off the bat, something was off. She figured since she was new to the place that would be normal, but that should have been her first sign to turn back. After a little while longer of walking, she noticed there was absolutely no birds, no bugs, not a single sound but the crunching of leaves under her feet. As dusk approached, she decided to turn around and head back before it got too dark. The only problem was, she had no idea which way was out. There were no markers, no tags, nothing. There was hardly even a trail left, like nobody had been there in a very long time. She took out her compass just to find it was spinning. She shook it a bit to get it to stop, and it did. Completely. When she turned, the needle just stayed in its place. She panicked a little and began walking, hoping that she would just find the way out. As sunset came upon, the sky became darker, and she started hearing strange noises. Some were human-like, but others weren't. She began to walk faster, worried there were big animals or sketchy people in the woods. The more she panicked, the more lost she got, and the creepier and closer the sounds got.
Oh, good. Lost in the woods at night with unidentified noises. Exactly how every great decision in history begins.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. At this point, she's either about to discover a hidden town or become the reason people don't go hiking after sunset.
She was not planning on sleeping in these woods. She started to speed walk. She then hears what sounds like twigs snapping and tree branches shaking. She turns around to look behind her, but sees nothing. She turns back to face the front and proceeds to walk as fast as she can. The noises behind her became faster and louder. She started to run, and that's when she heard the most bone-chilling, blood-curdling screech. It was so inhuman, so inanimal even. She can only describe it as the sound of death. She stopped in her tracks and slowly turned to see it. The creature stood about 9 to 10 feet tall. It seemed to be all skin and bone, with what looked like patches of fur or hair here and there. The head and face resembled a deer skull with remnants of a human face on it, with gnarly teeth. A Wendigo. Amazing hunters during the day and unbelievable hunters at night. It was stalking her the entire time. As soon as she entered the forest, that was it. She turned around and booked it as fast as she could, just to be yanked back by it grabbing her backpack. She slipped out of it and hit the ground running. She heard the screech as it ran alongside her through the trees. Panicking and running frantically, she tripped over a log and face-planted on the ground. The creature grabbed her feet and dragged her back. She took out a pocket knife and stabbed its gross, bony hand as hard as she could, just for it to let out a piercing shriek and dropped her. She ran and jumped over a rocky ledge, tumbling to the bottom, hitting her head on a rock. Hearing the screeching echoing in her head, she gets up, stumbling, and sees a crack in the trees, the way out. So close, yet so far, she tries to run, leaving a small trail of blood behind her. The creature approaches quickly behind her. As she reaches the exit, she looks back as it launches itself at her, coming down, slashing her with its clawed hands, sending her through the air, right out of the forest. The people cautiously run up to her, thinking she's dead, dragging her away from the edge of the forest. Her eyes snap open, and she panics just to find that she's out of the woods, alive and surrounded by the people. They tried to get her to talk about it, but she was in too much shock. She was unable to. This creature is real, because I was the only one to survive the terror of night woods.
Great story. The buildup is legit creepy. The no birds, no bugs, no sound moment. Classic horror done right. The compass malfunction. Excellent psychological unease. The townspeople reacting without explaining anything. Perfect ominous hook. The pacing ramps nicely. Walk to unease, to lost, to sounds, to chase, to reveal, to survival. It escalates cleanly without feeling rushed. The Wendigo reveal hits. The description is vivid and disturbing without over explaining. Remnants of a human face, especially unsettling. And the ending twist works. Survivor narration equals strong closing hook. Gives it that this isn't just a story vibe, which fits. Let's dive more into what a Wendigo is. The Wendigo, or Windigo, Wetico, or Witico, depending on the culture, isn't just one simple monster story. It's more like a collection of ideas passed down through different indigenous communities, especially among the northern Algonquin peoples.
At its core, it can be three things at once: a terrifying cannibalistic being, a story about somebody transforming into something monstrous, usually tied to extreme hunger or breaking serious taboos, and in some cases, a kind of spiritual or moral corruption, almost like being possessed by greed or desperation.
Even the name itself has multiple roots. The word Wendigo comes from a mix of languages like Cree and Ojibwe, with slightly different versions depending on who's telling the story. So, right from the start, this thing doesn't belong to just one version of the tale.
Now, here's where things get interesting. Older stories and oral histories consistently connect the Wendigo to harsh winters, starvation, and survival at any cost. When food runs out, when communities are pushed to the brink, that's when the danger appears. But, and this is important, the version most people picture today, the tall skeletal creature with deer antlers, that's mostly modern horror inventions. Classic indigenous stories didn't consistently describe it that way. The antlers, that's Hollywood dressing it up for maximum nightmare fuel.
There's also something called Wendigo psychosis, which is where things get controversial. Some researchers claimed there were rare cases where people became obsessed with cannibalism, tied to cultural beliefs about dreams, fate, or spiritual danger. But others argue that this idea was misunderstood or even created by outsiders, piecing together scattered stories without fully understanding the culture behind them. Even official medical sources have called it rare and openly debated whether it's even a real condition.
And today, the Wendigo has been pulled into movies, games, and pop culture, often stripped of its original meaning. What started as a powerful warning about greed, survival, and losing your humanity gets flattened into just another spooky monster. So maybe the real horror isn't the creature in the woods.
It's what people become when they're pushed too far. Let's clear something up right away. The Wendigo isn't just one creature with one story. It's more like a collection of nightmares told differently by different indigenous peoples.
What most stories agree on is across many northern Algonquin cultures, there's a shared theme, what researchers call the Wendigo complex. At its core, the Wendigo is tied to winter, starvation, cannibalism. It's not just a monster, it's a warning.
A warning about what happens when hunger takes over, morality breaks down, and survival turns ugly. Basically, when you stop being human. In some widely recorded Ojibwe stories, the Wendigo is a cannibal, sometimes literally a human who became one, or something bigger, more monstrous. Some tales even describe it as devouring raw animals, then moving on to humans like they're just the next course. No subtle, not polite, definitely not invited to dinner.
Nope. In Cree teachings, the Wendigo is often described more directly, an evil spirit that eats people, but it's also something deeper. It represents famine, desperation, that moment when survival instincts go too far. Think of it less as a creature and more like the line you should never cross.
Definitely creepy.
Mhm.
For the Innu, the historical record is a bit thinner, at least in widely available sources. But we do know the word and idea go back hundreds of years. It shows up in early records tied to their language and culture. The details, less documented publicly, but the presence is definitely there.
The Wendigo isn't just something lurking in the woods, it's something that can happen to people when hunger, greed, and desperation take over and the humanity gets left behind in the snow. So the real monster is bad decisions.
And maybe skipping dinner one too many times. we now know some of the cultural differences, but what about from a medical standpoint? Wendigo psychosis, real madness, or misunderstood myth? Let's break this down without sounding like a haunted textbook. Psychologists and psychiatrists have argued for decades about something called Wendigo psychosis. But here's the twist, it's not just about symptoms, it's about whether it was ever a real condition at all.
Back in the mid 1900s, some researchers tried to define a mental disorder where a person became obsessed with eating human flesh,
Ew.
falls deep into depression or dread, fears that they're turning into a cannibal while also craving it. So basically, your brain goes, I'm becoming the monster, and I might like it just a little. Not exactly comforting.
No. And what about, like I said, there was a show out there that actually put kind of almost a theory to the test. If you were stranded with nothing to eat, would you turn to cannibalism?
Who's getting eaten first?
Exactly. You just never know what you would do in certain circumstances. So we're going to move on to 3 ways experts tried to explain it. The mind meets myth theory. Some researchers said the Wendigo wasn't just a legend. It was tied to real psychological breakdowns. In other words, the stories people believed could actually shape their mental state. Translation: if you grow up fearing the Wendigo, your mind might eventually become the Wendigo.
That's scary.
It is.
The maybe it's physical theory. Others wondered if this wasn't a mental thing at all. They looked at things like malnutrition, starvation, environmental stress. Basically, when your body is breaking down, your mind might follow. So instead of a curse, it could be survival gone horribly wrong.
Then there's the this was never a disorder theory. Then came the skeptics. Some experts flat out said this isn't a real mental illness. They argued it was more about social conflict, fear within communities, or even accusations used to justify punishment or exile. Translation: calling someone a Wendigo might have been less diagnosis, more death sentence.
Other researchers pushed back and said, hold on, something was happening. They argued there are real historical accounts, it can't just be explained by starvation alone, and cultural beliefs like dreams, fate, and spiritual transformation play a huge role. So instead of dismissing it, they said we need to understand it within the culture it came from.
The big modern take? Later scholars dropped a pretty chilling idea. What if Wendigo psychosis wasn't discovered, but created by researchers trying to label something they didn't fully understand? Meaning, the diagnosis itself might be the myth.
Even the medical world isn't sure. The official diagnostic books, like the ICD-10, that's a book,
That's the book.
lists it as rare, historical, and controversial. They even admit some cases may be accusations, not actual illnesses.
So, where does that leave us? Yes, there are real stories and records, but most cases are secondhand and inconsistent, and experts still can't agree. So the truth sits somewhere in the dark between a real but rare condition, a cultural phenomenon, or a misunderstanding that spiraled into legend.
So, was the Wendigo in their minds? Or were their minds simply trying to survive something more terrifying? I like this because it still doesn't completely answer it. It's still a
Yeah,
mystery. There's no solid answers.
it's not clear, and I
Yeah.
guess that leaves it up to your own beliefs.
Yeah. Keeps it creepy. I like
Does
it.
creepy.
Now, the Wendigo has become a creature that has been lurking in movies, video games, and honestly, your algorithm.
Because somewhere along the way, a deeply meaningful warning story turned into check notes. A deer headed, antler wearing forest demon with a personal vendetta.
Let's start with what most people picture: tall, skin stretched tight over bone, glowing eyes, and of course, the antlers. Because nothing says ancient spiritual warning like Forest Bambi from hell.
Dang, right? It's basically if a deer, a skeleton, and your worst life choices all merged into one nightmare creature. And don't get me wrong, it's creepy. But here's the twist: that look, not original.
Yeah, the antlers, that's a modern add on. Movies, games, and internet horror, they leaned hard into the deer demon aesthetic.
Let's talk about what pop culture did with it. Because once the Wendigo hit mainstream horror, it basically got a full Hollywood makeover.
Movies like Antlers, full on deer like monster. Video games like Until Dawn, great game. Fast, terrifying skeletal creatures, basically nightmare parkour champions.
And shows like Supernatural, they went with a more human turned monster vibe, but still leaned into the creature feature side of things.
That's what Until Dawn did. The Until Dawn Wendigos aren't the deer licking things, they're very humanoid. And to me, that makes it much creepier.
Yes, because it's something you can relate to.
And they are very fast.
Ooh,
You gotta think quick in that game.
think quick.
Yeah. So what you get is this mashup: cannibalism, curse, antlers, forest horror, and jump scares equals modern Wendigo trademark. Now available in theaters and your nightmares.
Nice. Now, not all modern uses are as far off from the original meaning of Wendigo. Indigenous writers and artists are still using it with intention, including you. Instead of just boo, scary monster,
They use it to talk about real issues, things like generational trauma, environmental destruction, and the consequences of unchecked greed.
so the Wendigo becomes symbolic again. We have a gruesome creature from your nightmares and a reflection of human behavior. So, what's the takeaway? Modern Wendigos look incredible. They're creepy, dramatic, and perfect for horror.
But the real horror isn't in the design, it's in the idea.
A hunger that never stops, a need that keeps growing, a person who loses themselves completely.
And at its core, the Wendigo isn't just a monster you can run from, if you can. It's a warning about what happens when you stop holding yourself back.
Thank you for stepping out of the light and into the dark with us, for giving us a piece of your time, your curiosity, and maybe a few of your nerves.
We don't take it lightly. You could have been anywhere tonight, but you chose to wander these shadows with us, and that means more than you know.
Whether you came for the stories, the chills, or just to see what was lurking.
We're glad you were here for it.
And remember, the darkness doesn't end when the episode does.
If this little dark descent stirred something into you, go ahead and tap that like button and feed the algorithm. It's always hungry, like the Wendigo.
Subscribe if you dare. We promise nothing but strange tales, unsettling truths, and just enough chaos to keep you up at night.
And hit that notification bell so you can hear us creeping in the moment when a new episode arises from the void.
Because you wouldn't want to miss what's lurking in the next shadow. Creep it real.
Real.